I put it onto a Wembley Arena letterhead and I sent it to the Ahmadiyya, naively thinking, that's fine. It was picked up by one of the big non-Jewish papers in America who called Wembley Arena and said, we have this letter on your letterhead. Is it genuine? Then we went to see a customer who had just won the contract for the Rugby World Cup in Cardiff. They needed 4,000 blue tablecloth over 2 weeks. We had 6. I'm an atheist. I don't believe. But I respect religion, but I cannot work with people who place religion in front of business. I need it in writing from your Beth Din that even when you're bowing down in temple on a Friday night, you can have your mobile phone. When you have that in writing, we'll continue doing business. He sued us for the full value of the contract and we countersued him, and she said, listen, I want to tell you something. Yours has got epilepsy written on it. You're never going to drive. And your packet says you're going to struggle in life.
Yechiel Leitner, thank you so much for carving out time of your schedule to meet me this morning. I think I've known you all my life. One of the figures who I just feel like I've grown up with. Always the smiley, friendly neighbour. Experienced Balkoira. For many years we enjoyed you Shabbos morning. Take us back to the beginning, where you grew up. What was Stanford like before I came around?
So I was born in Stanford Hill. Like you say, we did live Restrieva Avenue together, but I was born in Stanford Hill, in Linwood Road actually. And I went to Lubavitch Primary School. At the time, Lubavitch was still like a mainstream school. And so my parents sent me to Lubavitch. I wasn't a Lubavitcher, but it was just at the time when Tzivos Hashem just started at that time. Actually, I remember one story. As a kid of about 6, we had a boy in our school called Mishka Goldberg. I don't even know if he's still alive. I don't know. Lived out in Ilford. He was a bit of a wild kid. I shouldn't have said his name. But anyway, no, there's probably a few other Mishka Goldbergs out there. So he one day put a firework behind the radiator of the class. His father was very wealthy, lived in Ilford, was a very wealthy guy, and it blew up the classroom. And I think the ceiling came down. It was quite a mess. And he rebuilt the school, the one in Darrett Road, the corner of Darrett Road. And as a gift, so to speak, after having rebuilt the school, he gave a ticket to 2 boys of every class to go to Chabad 770 for Shavuos, the Rebbe. I think in Lubavitch, Shavuos is one of the highlights, and 2 boys of each class got a ticket to go to the Rebbe, and I was one of the boys who got in. I'm not Lubavitch. I was 7 years old. My parents were worried. He's going to go there. Maybe he'll get into Chabad. So they said
the best of us, Yechiel. I mean, you know my history.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So my parents said, listen, you're a bit too young to. I had never flown either. He's too young. We'll trade it. Let's trade it. What can we give instead? And I traded my 770 ticket, which is basically priceless, for an Everest ice lolly from Grudzinski. And I remember eating it quite quickly because I was scared my parents might change their minds before we would back out. So that was my introduction. But my affinity to Lubavitch actually stayed. There's a WhatsApp group we have, which is the class of 74, which is our class. And I still know some of the guys there. But at that time, Chabad or Lubavitch Primary School was a school which others also went to. Now it's really become just Lubavitch. From there, I went to Parder's house. That was Rabbi Davis, was our Rebbe who just passed away recently. That was another thing actually. I don't know if do you remember Rabbi Davis? Mm-hmm. He lived in St Andrew's Grove.
I got accepted into Parder's, but I never wanted to go, so I stayed in the okay. A bit of a crazy story.
It's funny because Rabbi Davis was an extraordinary person, a great teacher, and often he used to come into the class to faher us, and when we didn't know the thing, he taught us the Gemara then, and then he fared us. He knew it. He was an excellent Rebbe, but I was terrified of him. We were all terrified of him. He passed away just recently at the age of 94, 95. He was, and he became old and very frail. And he lived in Etzrol, and he came back always for the summer because it was too hot. He came here. I must have seen him maybe 2 years ago, 89 years old, walking up Stanford Hill with his stick, and I crossed the road to avoid him. I was still scared of him, even though. And it's funny how people in your mind who you're scared of as a kid, you're always scared of them, even until there's just a certain fear which you have. He really was a great headmaster. And from there, I went to Shara Torah in Manchester, with one of the founders, and I still go back every year for Yom Kippur to Shara Torah. I'm not connected as such. I run their campaigns as well, but I'm close with the Rosh Yeshiva of Gavil. And whenever he comes to London, I pick him up from the station, wherever it may be, and he can call me from 1 minute to the next. I mean, he can call me in the morning and say, I'm coming in an hour. And it's tough because my wife would call me and say, I need to go to whatever, can you give me a lift? And I'll say, no, that's what the taxi's there for. She says, I've never ever heard you say that to a gorilla.
Right.
But you don't say that, talking about age and talking about how you perceive people. It's interesting because, I'm 55 now. When Gavril started the yeshiva, I mean, I also see him as an older person and amazing. He's always been, but thinking back now, he was 15 years younger than I am when he started the yeshiva.
Right.
Yet, as an older person, it's just people who, and he actually once said to me that, and it's also quite interesting that when you go to yeshiva and you have boys in your shir who are your contemporaries, and you have boys who are 3 years older than you, that's all, and they're the shir above you, and you always see them as the older boys.
Yeah.
Those remain older boys for the rest of your life, even though the gap between you and them
starts to shrink.
So that was right there. Then I moved to, I got married in Stafford Hill. I was in Israel for a very short time. My first son, who was born with epilepsy, so I had to come back to the UK, and I joined my father's business. Lived in Stafford Hill, and I've lived there ever since.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so we're going to tap into different things along the way. Before we get into your journey of business, which I know is fascinating, and we've got a lot to unpack, I just want to touch on one skill, which I seem to have this memory of you as a younger child as always having the ability to write and narrate things, either for articles. Your name was in articles, I think for the CMA Shas in London, you narrated part of their video.
So
where did that come?
When I was a child, we had a girl who was from Gateshead. She's married and she lives in Gateshead now. This is way before AI, before the internet even. Yeah. So obviously you couldn't cheat your way through it. She was really good at English. And I remember I was in Father's house. We had an English teacher called Mr. Bayard. He was a good English teacher and he used to give us essays. And I remember we had an essay which we had to write 100 words on autumn leaves. And she wrote it for me, or she dictated it for me. And Mr. Bayard gave it back to me and he said, it's 0 out of 100 you're getting for this, but if you can translate, for every word you can translate what you've just written, you get 1 point. You can get up to 100. I didn't have a clue what I wrote, but she taught me, and amazingly, she taught me how to write. And I mean, now it's so much, it's very different. But learning how to write was a skill I learned young, and I've always enjoyed that. In fact, I've written for I've written for the Jewish Tribune. I've written for the Hamadiyah. I haven't. Now it's very different, but my job was often to write. And an interesting story where the H3 conference takes place every year, and I write the article there. A couple of years ago, so it really depends on what day of the week it is as to when they need it, because the Hamadiyah deadline is a Tuesday.
Right.
So 2 years ago, it was on a Tuesday, which meant that the pressure, because they didn't want to put it a week later, it's going to be too late.
Still, yeah.
So they said to me, it needs to be in by 8:30 in the evening, and the event was finishing at 8:30. So of course, during the course of the day, I could write it, but the dinner was starting at 6:30 and finishing at 8:30. So I knew I had to be prepared. One of the speakers was Saul Werdiger,
right,
who spoke. So I took the chance and I listened to 2 of his similar speeches in Toronto, and I wrote them out beforehand. And as soon as he began to speak, I realized he was saying the same speech, wasn't sure 100%. So I submitted the article to the Hamadiyah before he even finished saying it. Yeah. So writing is something which I've never done it as.
Right. But covering events like that's really, you're weaving a tapestry of different people's anecdotes and different examples of interactions that you've seen between people. You're really painting a picture for the reader of what you lived in that three-dimensional experience.
Absolutely.
And you learned that in school as a youngster.
I learned that in school. A lot of that you develop. You get better than that. Everything you do, I guess you get better at that. But people are fascinating. Everyone has a story. And what I actually started many years beforehand, if you think about the amount of speeches we hear in our lives and the amount of things we hear in our life which are interesting, and sometimes we have to speak ourselves, and we sit down and we try and prepare, we try and think of something, and if we could somehow track back all the good things that we've heard, it's basically we wouldn't have to prepare.
Having a library which we can draw on.
I mean, now it's so much easier online, but I started about 7 or 8 years ago recording every speech that I hear when I go to a wedding. I just record.
Wow.
And I don't necessarily listen that well because it's very hard to listen, but I listen enough to know there was something he said well there, and then I go back to it afterwards, write it down, and then and then keep that in one of the online programs. I have around about 15 to 20,000 notes. It's quite hard to find back, but it's amazing how much we hear.
Yeah.
So people have a lot to
That's
say.
beautiful.
And
That's
what I learned
beautiful.
was, when you're an interviewer, so you're going to know this better than I do. But if we're able to reach into people, there's a lot that we can hear, and then obviously just writing that out. And
that's what I was thinking about, being perceptive, because you walk into a room, for some people it's overwhelming, you just get this mental lockdown. But to walk into a space or a wedding, like you're saying, just to perceive those interactions, hear those anecdotes, lodge them, store them, and draw back onto them when you need them later on. It's an incredible skill.
I mean, you're a podcaster, but you listen to podcasts, and obviously some bits are better than others. Some bits are you want to record, and very often we absorb so much during the course of a day and of a week. Very hard for us to recall. And sometimes I can be driving from Stamford to Golders Green, and I'm listening to a podcast, and you're also concentrating on driving, of course, and therefore you're not completely focused. And I get to Golders Green, I've basically forgotten the total topic, but I remember that there was one good piece. When I re-listen to it, I know, okay, I was on Whiteman Road, and it wasn't so good. The piece was on Muswell Hill. I always remember where it was, get to that piece, and then you hear it again. And the world of podcasts now has changed that, because there's so much out there content, But you're right. It really is about understanding a person and getting in there too.
Very nice, very nice. It's funny you mentioned about writing down. Rabbi Yechiel Cohen, who was my manal in Be'er Torah in Gateshead, he encouraged us to get index boxes. And I've got a home still. For years, I was collating every Shabbos meal I used to go to. Used to come back Motzei Shabbos, that was my writing time. Just always writing down things that I'd heard by different meals, and especially at Stroll, eating by different people. And I came back with this beautiful library of index cards organized with little tabs.
So if you're organized and you have that all indexed well, the problem with the written thing is that you can have boxes and boxes of papers.
I stopped after a few years.
And the problem is, but obviously now when you can tag things online, as long as you do this properly. Yeah. And I used to have this aim of trying to add at least one item a day, but I'm not as religious about that. But it's amazing when you have to speak and you can just go back into a speech and pick out something which someone said.
Fascinating.
Reb Zev Feldman, who once said that when he speaks, he knows that a good story, a good joke you can only say once every 2 years.
Right.
A good story maybe once a year. So the good thought, I can say it twice in the same speech. The bottom line is that people remember stories, people remember anecdotes, and it's important for us to know that, when you come to giving a speech, it's really, especially at the chasnas and things like that, it's not about necessarily the good thought. People hear so much of that. It's a good story is what people remember. At the Siyum Shas, the 2012 Siyum Shas, going back to that, actually, besides for the actual organizing, I actually wrote, this is something separate, but I actually wrote the report for that.
Right.
And I remember we got a call from the Hamadiyah called and said, we got some great feedback. Was it great? Do you remember the event?
The event I remember, yeah.
It was a great event, and there was a huge buzz, and a lot of feedback was very, very positive. So they asked me to collate some of the feedback and to put it in as, they want to put like bullet points. Right. One of the feedbacks we had was from the woman who ran the arena. She came to me afterwards and sent me a text message, and she said to me, I've got to tell you, it was a pleasure dealing with you. And 7,000 people coming through the door. We didn't have to inspect any bags. It was amazing. It was really great. So much easier than some of the other events that we've done. She sent to me as a personal text message too. So I thought, naively, this is great feedback. But it's a text message. So I transposed the text message onto a piece of paper, which is fine. Then I thought, let me make this look a bit better. So it's only for the Hamadiyah.
Right.
So I put it onto a Wembley Arena letterhead. Just the letter, and I made it as a letter, and I sent it to the Hamadiyah, naively thinking, that's fine. And the letter just said, this is, it was great working with you. It was really good. So much easier than just the words that she had said,
right.
But transposed that onto. Now that letter went to the Hamadiyah, and it went viral. When I say went viral, it went round the world to a degree that I couldn't even have dreamt it. It was massive Kiddush Hashem. Wow. Someone non-Jewish is saying that the Jewish people, the way they run their events this is amazing. It was picked up by all the papers, and it was picked up by one of the big non-Jewish papers in America, who called Wembley Arena and said, we have this letter on your letterhead. Is it genuine? And obviously it wasn't, technically it was genuine, but it wasn't genuine because they called me and they said, "Who's this letter?" And I got into a lot of trouble because it blew over in the end.
Right.
But I learned then how careful you need to
what a
be
story.
when you write. And even today, her name was Becky, and that was her name. Till today, amongst us organisers, when something goes wrong, it's called a Becky moment because.
She called it a Yechiel moment. You're the one that screwed up. Fascinating. Wow. So go on. So you could take me back to the voiceover. So that skill it's a separate skill essentially, being able to carry a story and share it.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking and writing is very different. You have some people who are excellent speakers and not such good writers, and vice versa. A lot more. And sometimes you go to an event and you hear someone speak and you think, he writes a lot better than
100%. I've noticed this recently with the world of podcasting. Suddenly, people who are authors of books or big article writers, suddenly they're going on the mic and they can't get a cohesive sentence together.
Yes.
And it's very interesting. Literally, what you're saying.
Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson is probably one of the people who speaks well and writes well.
Yeah.
Perhaps possibly he speaks better than he writes. Also, I find that people in different languages. Ephraim Waxman, I listen to a lot. His English is amazing. The way he conveys his English is, but he speaks English as well, and he writes well. So obviously, speaking is a skill on its own. Maybe I'm diverting a little bit here, but Rabbi Waxman, one of the things that I realize when I want to learn how to speak and how to write is to connecting to the people who are good speakers and good writers. But someone like Rabbi Waxman, Ephraim Waxman, or Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson have got a network of people. You go to America, you can't get to them.
Right.
What I realized was that when they come out of their comfort zone, they come to the UK, they're a little bit more vulnerable. Is not quite that, but they sort of need other people. So I offer myself forward as a driver to pick these people up. Now, Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson there's a queue of people waiting to, but Ephraim Waxman, I'm still his driver till today, which means whenever he comes to the UK, I pick him up. And it's amazing. You have one of these people in the car for an hour. I record them when they're in the car. I shouldn't even say this. I hope they don't hear. But it's amazing what you can. Ephraim Waxman is. I mean, he's the king of orator. He really is. Yeah. In fact, he was here once, and I picked him up to take him. He was here for a chasna. He was in Stamford Hill afterwards. He spoke in Ger, then he spoke in one of the schools in Golders Green. Then he went to the airport. So I went with him for Shacharis, and then he went for breakfast to his sister-in-law. And then he went to speak, and he is talking about in one of the schools in Golden, in Elion School, he's talking about the potential of a person, how much potential we each have, talking to children. And he said, if you took one apple core, he took out of his pockets an apple pip, and he says, if you took an apple pip and you planted that, and you were really successful with that, and you planted, within 35 years, you have enough apples to feed the whole world. That was the point he said. Now, I'd once asked him many times earlier if he prepares his speeches or if it's on the cuff. He didn't really answer me. I got the impression he basically doesn't know until he's going to get up there what he's going to say. But at that speech, he took out from his pocket an apple pip. So I asked him afterwards, I said, I once asked you if you prepare your speeches. So the answer is either you do, or every time you buy a Bekisher, you put an apple pip in just in case you're going to say that speech afterwards. But it's fascinating, the world of speaking and the world of writing.
Closing up on that segment, just being around Rabbonim and big public figures, just having the questions to ask, I think is also a tremendous thing, because very often you can be in the vicinity of those people and you kind of get a bit overwhelmed and you're not sure. You want to ask a question, you don't want to waste the opportunity, but what do I ask?
Exactly. And you're sitting in the car and Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, I've only picked him up, I think, twice. And I mean, there's nothing better when you have someone like that in the car, when you've got to sign up for traffic ahead and you've got a way that says 14-minute jam and you think, can it be 24 minutes? But you just need to, as a driver for these people, you also have to be aware of the fact that sometimes they don't want to talk,
right? And
sit back when they don't want to talk. But very often you just need to switch them on into one point. And I mean, some of the priceless lessons I've learned from with Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson in the car. Some of the stories he said to me at the time, I still recall. I've heard them since.
Right. Right. Fascinating. Okay, let's move on to your business journey. I know you had a crazy story getting your first hotel contract. I want you to share the story with us today, and also just to package it for us. Do you think that as a youngster, did you have this element of good Jewish chutzpah? Were you kind of that energetic boy who was always pushing boundaries, pushing the envelope a little bit, or did you force yourself to become somebody who you weren't naturally in order to achieve what you wanted to achieve?
So generally, I'm outgoing, and I'm a yes person. So I'm a nice person in business, and I've often thought to myself, do you need to be vicious in business to be successful? And I think the answer is you do need to be shrewd and you do need to be on the ball, but you don't necessarily have to be really tough in business. When I joined my father's business in 1995, so he has a tablecloth business. So he buys a tablecloth, and what he was doing was he went to a UK supplier, bought tablecloth from a UK supplier and rented it out. He had two customers, was Mrs. Gottesman and Nachman Reich, who was two customers. And every part of the journey from buying the tablecloth, getting it into his office, delivering it, collecting it, washing it and getting it back was all farmed out. He was just doing the little bit in between. Right. I've got to say, do you remember my father? I've got to say, he's obviously not been in now 14 years, but he was a Ben Torah who landed up in the office. His head was always in his Gemara and everything else. And when I joined the business, I came in as an energetic, clueless 26 or 27-year-old, really didn't know what I was doing. And the first thing I remember saying to him was, it's embarrassing. We've got two customers. It's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed to say. He said, fine. I said, but we haven't got any stock. He said, then buy the stock. It's not a problem. Just do what you want to do. He gave me the free rein.
Right.
So I remember, it was pre-internet. You didn't do research. You wanted to find a number. It was the old A to Z. I remember opening up the London A to Z. Do you remember the A to Z?
A to Z maps. You mean the
sorry. There was the
that I remember.
Yellow
Stopping on the side of the road to check.
Yellow pages.
Yellow pages. Right,
A to. And I remember, people were. Drainage was A1 because you wanted to be the first, and that was the only way to be first.
We grew up with three books: the A to Z, the Argos catalogue, and the Yellow Pages. That's how we got through life.
Exactly. So the Yellow Pages, I went through it, and I thought, let's start. So I looked under hotels, and I didn't even know the hotels, but I saw London Hilton. That's a nice hotel. So picked up the phone. A guy called Simon Willits, who was the banqueting manager. I didn't even know the title was called bank manager. I phoned up. I think they may have thought I was a client, a possible client. Straight through to him. Nowadays, all the gatekeepers, straight through to him. And he answered the phone. He said, how can I help you? I said, we're a tablecloth supplier in London. Would you use us for tablecloth? And he said to me, oh, thank you very much. Very polite. He said to me, but I have a supplier. I have an existing supplier based in Manchester, and we're fine. So I said to him, I understand that. Firstly, I said, we're in London. So you could have an emergency. You might want to use us. Or we may have a colour, So he said, fine. Took down my number and he says, next time I need you, I'll call you. About 2 weeks later, it was just myself in the office. We had one other person working there. The phone goes. He never met me. He knew my name as Josh. Josh, it's Simon Willits on the phone. I've got an order. 6 white tablecloth, but I need it very soon. Can you deliver? So I said to him, let me see if I've got a driver. It's last minute. So obviously it's going to be me. It wasn't very, very much to do. Came back to the phone and said, yes, I have a driver. We're going to come to you. We'll be with you within the hour. He said, that's excellent. That's the type of service that I was looking for. And that's the reason why I'd possibly come back to you again. Got into the car, took my father's car. I didn't have my own car, the old Volvo, the 240, I think it was, and my father's mobile phone. He had a mobile phone. He worked for Hudsola, so he had a mobile phone quite early. It was one of the really big ones. Ones you needed, 2 hands to hold. And took his phone and I because I was the only one in the office, I diverted the office phone to the mobile. I don't want to miss any other calls. And I left. A to Z, 6 tablecloth in the car, his mobile phone, and we left. Now, I had no idea how to get, you say it was pre-Waze, took the map with me. I had no idea how to get to London Hilton. So I kept on checking the map all the way through. But he was anxious because he wanted to know where the driver was. So he called the office to speak to me to find out where the driver was. And I said to him, I'll call you back, obviously. And we're going back 30 years, so we're talking about telephones that were probably quite obvious.
Right.
That was going through But anyway, I called him back, said, yes, the driver said he's in Finsbury Park. And then the driver said he's on Camden Road. And the driver says this, the driver said that. He probably called me 5 or possibly 6 times. And when I arrived down Park Lane, turned into this roundabout, there's a roundabout on the London Hilton, there's a little roundabout. I've never seen him.
Right.
But he was standing on the roundabout, and I came and he said, who are you? I said, I'm the driver for the table. I said, oh, so happy you've arrived. I need to call Josh now and tell him because I've really driven him crazy. I'm going to call Josh now and tell him that you've arrived. And he called and my mobile phone went off. Now, it went off in front of him. Now, he knew.
Yeah.
And I knew that he knew, and he knew that I knew that he knew. We all knew this. And I gave him the tablecloth, didn't say a word to him. I was very embarrassed and went back. He never dealt with me again. Simon Willis never dealt with him. I have no idea where he is and everything else. But he did send me a message after. He called me actually, and he said to me, listen, there's nothing wrong. He says, you're young. I can see you're young. And he says, I realized that on the way that, you were the driver, and there's nothing wrong with that. On the contrary, that's small businesses. I like supporting small business, but be honest. Yeah. Just be truthful. If there's one thing I'm going to tell you to take with you in life is to be honest and be truthful. And that's probably the first story and it's probably one of the fundamentals of business is, obviously we're not talking about telling a customer that, it's cost £5 and charging them £6, but trying to be honest. And I've made many mistakes on the way. But that's one thing which I believe that if we're able to embrace it, to be truthful to ourselves and to be truthful to those around us, colleagues, staff, that's probably one of the fundamentals of business. And that was my sort of introduction to the business.
What a brilliant story. Story. I mean, there was definitely an element of not everyone could do what you did, just the thought process. Let me divert the call. Let me pretend to be somebody else. That takes creativity.
It takes creativity. Maybe you can say it doesn't take honesty. Maybe you can say that's the way you need to do it, and you need to bend a little bit in order to become successful or bigger. And I mean, the other part of that journey, this was when my brother-in-law had already joined the business. So I joined in 95. My brother-in-law joined in 98. He was more back end, really good for machinery. We sort of moved out. We built out the business and we put the pieces in place. But this part, I believe, so we had very few customers, but then we went to see a customer who had just won the contract for the Rugby World Cup in Cardiff. Now, my father had a total of 6 Royal Blue tablecloth. That was his stock. Mrs. Gossamer must have had a show of rockers once for 6 tablecloth. That's what he bought. They called us and said they've got this contract. We had the laundry ready, so we were a bit more in control. Right. They needed us 4,000 blue tablecloth over 2 weeks. We had 6. So they said to me, do we have the stock? I said, I believe we have around about 2,800 to 3,000. We're going to be short, but we'll wait. And we got the contract and we made it work. Obviously, it was a lot of pressure. That type of not being honest to the customer is probably the way to grow a business. Because if I would turn around the customer and say, I've only got 6 tablecloth, the conversation would have ended. Yeah. Getting from 6 tablecloth to the required amount was a journey which we had to take. The customer wasn't aware of the fact that we were under pressure, buying fabric for whatever we could. As long as we delivered on the day, that was fine. So bending in order to be able to see the future is not really not being honest.
Meaning embracing those larger expectations that you're comfortable taking on and then filling that gap. And that's where growth happens.
And even embracing that larger expectation, obviously, that is risk-taking up to a point.
Of course, because your suppliers may have turned around and said, sorry, Josh, there's a shipping issue. We can't get the stuff to you, whatever it is. And you have to answer that.
And there are people who are not comfortable with that. And that type of, you talk about the characteristics of growing a business, that type of characteristic I've always had, sort of risk-taking. In fact, the reason why the business grew well with myself and my brother-in-law was my brother-in-law is more careful, which when it comes to systems is important. So take a risk when it comes to systems. But when you're dealing with customer service and not customer service necessarily, but building up customers, you do have to say yes without a very clear plan as to how you're going to do it. As long as it's
and as it makes sense that it could work out.
Possible to do.
Right. And also the shoulders to handle if things go a little bit pear-shaped, how to maneuver that thing.
Correct, yeah.
Fascinating. Well, I'm curious to understand, your father, you said when you came in 95, he had 2 customers. He was happy with that. He was genuinely happy with that operation. He didn't have the drive to scale to grow, to push it out.
You have people who are in business, who are driven in business. You have people who look at business as just a tool to bring Parnosa home, and both are fine.
Right.
He taught in London SEM. He gave Shurim all the day, and that was what he wanted to do. I remember when we were growing the business, and I often felt that I wasn't on the same page as him because his she'ifa was elsewhere.
Right.
And I remember one year, the big growth of the business was from 98 to 2004, 2005. And those days I was doing, 14, 16-hour days. And I remember on Motzah Tisha B'Av, because Tisha B'Av, he didn't call the office. I was in the office from Chatzos, but I was there. And he said to me after Tisha B'Av, how was your Tisha B'Av? I said, well, this customer said, no, but how was your Tisha B'Av?
Oh, wow.
He said, I just finished Medrash Rabbah on Eicha. So, of course, it's where your priorities lie, I guess, as to and that's where he was.
Right.
So
did he ever feel threatened that you were coming in and trying to shake things up and change what he held to believe was valuable and the right way of life? And like, Yechiel, chill out. Like, I've been an example of what it means to be a Ben Torah, to feed my family respectfully. Why do you have to shake things up? Why have to go for why are you chasing London Hilton? Like,
correct. If he never articulated it clearly. I know when we used to go there for Shabbos, we lived in Stamford, we used to go to Gold's Green for Shabbos. He was frustrated if I ever spoke about business, even on the Motzah Shabbos. Now is not time for that. During those times, I was so driven that that's all I could think about. And it frustrated me that he was thinking of other things. That's the only thing we need to think about. There is a happy medium in between.
Right.
I don't believe that people like my father can build a business. Didn't want to.
Right.
But on the other hand, working in a business for 16 or 18 hours a day is probably also, there is a happy medium somewhere. And it was probably closer, somewhere in the middle, I guess.
And you had to put in those long stretches of hours. That was the initial segment of your years in the business. Did things settle after that?
Going from a Mrs. Gottesman to, Cardiff rugby and all the, and we were dealing with, Battersea Park. They have a marquee up in Battersea Park, and they have, during December, they've got parties, Christmas parties, basically starting from November to December, and it's back to back. Now, what I learned quite quickly was that if you're late, think about how many weddings you've been to in your life, hundreds, how many events. Yeah. If I was to ask you the color of the tablecloth in a single of the events you've been to, try and recall, you won't remember. Yeah. No one knows. I go to a wedding, the first thing I'm going to look at is feel the fabric, good quality, cotton, polyester, washed well, not washed well, why is the stamp in this corner, not that corner? But that's what I do, like everyone. Yeah. But the one thing, though, which is key is nothing starts without the tablecloth on the table. Without a tablecloth, you can't do anything. Right. In fact, I remember we used to have a driver called Nick, old guy. He was right there at the beginning, really slow. And when we started, it was fine. For Mrs. Gottsman, he came a bit late, it was fine to Walton the town hall. But we were trying to become more professional. And I kept saying to Nick, please leave at 8 o'clock. But he used to come to work and then go to the bathroom and then make a coffee until he left was 10, 11 o'clock. One time, Mr. Reich phoned me. It was Mr. Reich. He said, I have a job in the Hilton Metropole and I need the tablecloth there at 10 o'clock. It's got to be there at 10 o'clock.
They can't start tables
because I can't do anything. And I've got 3-4 events that day and I just need it. And it was before the days he had different teams. Nick must have left the office at 11:30. So we were already late. He got there and, he delivered the tablecloth, obviously. When he came back, he said to me, I said, how was Mr. Reich? He must have been angry. He said, he was furious. But I don't know why. He hadn't even laid the tables yet. But the bottom line was, this was Nick working for 30 years and he hadn't actually realized what the purpose of his job was. But the bottom line is, it's a really small part, but it's quite key. And what we found with the non-Jewish customers were, Jewish customers, sometimes you can deal with it. But the non-Jewish customers are under a lot of pressure. An event is a very pressurizing, any of the caterers will say that. And it's got to run smoothly. Yeah. And when something goes wrong, even at the end of the event, and you were late for tablecloth, they'll blame us and say the reason why the whole day went wrong.
A domino system.
Yeah. But it's very, very labor intensive. Very, any customer service job is always going to be a job which you've got to be on it 24 hours, and it's a tough job, and you burn out. And part of my journey was that burnout, which is maybe we'll address, but there's a limit to how long you can be working.
Sure.
We had a day shift and night shift. And I was running the day shift, running the night shift, and you just burn out.
Night shift for the laundry to be ready for the next day, right?
Because, for instance, in this rugby World Cup, so we didn't have enough cloth, so we would pick up the tablecloth at, let's say, 7 in the evening. It was back at 11, wash it through the night, and the driver went out with the same cloth the next morning. It was fine. Yeah. The customer was happy with it. It didn't make a difference to the customer, but the background pressure to get that out is tough.
So make sure we get to that, because I'm really curious to understand what that chart looked like from the ups and down. But I want to just quickly tap into the industry that you're in specifically. It's interesting that the Jewish community, very often we find businesses that are established and manage to take root within the Jewish community. And that's pretty much where the networking happens. That's where the client base is born out of. And many businesses kind of stay within that realm. These are the people they know from shul, from school. These are family friends. And the outgrowth is of their immediate vicinity. But to go beyond that and to say, you know what, I've got a product that I can actually service up and down the country to anybody. And to break out of that mindset that I don't need to be staying local in my community, but I can service anyone. My question to you is, how did you embed yourself as a successful player outside of the community? Like, what was your route to saying, let's get out of there? And what can businesses learn from your journey to say, I've got a product that I can service to a wider audience. Let's not be scared about making that first move.
So the first thing I would say is that we need to expand our mindset. That's definitely, we need to think bigger. Within the Jewish community, the way I find it, and more so in my recent journey with working with other businesses, is that we find that how does someone set up a business? So what he does is he decides which area he's going to serve. If he's a shop, he decides which area he's going to serve. He does proper research as to what business is missing in the area. And he thinks, you know what, there's no shoe shop in the area. I'll open up a shoe shop. Or there's no dry cleaner in the area. And dry cleaners are very much a small catchment area. So I'll open up a dry cleaner in the area because I've got that catchment area. That makes sense. But if there is already a dry cleaner, he's not going to open that. Unfortunately, with the Jewish businesses, it's what business is working well.
Right.
You know, I'll open up exactly the same shop,
Right.
the same business in the same street. Maybe it's because we're lack of training, or maybe it's because we don't go to business school and we don't learn business. We sort of learn it on the job. So we haven't got the confidence. We're much more confident dealing with a Yid who's going to give us the room to make a mistake, and he's going to give us, you know, whatever, anything that we feel that we're lacking, he's going to give us. But the honest truth is, and dealing with businesses now, there's businesses out there that have nothing to be ashamed of in the bigger world as well. Yeah, our processes might not be as good. Our products are generally as good. The thinking behind it, some of the people out here are so creative. It's just amazing what they can think of. And it's just a case of saying they're not better. It's not as if other suppliers, but sometimes they can be. But to be very confident in the product, I was probably naively confident. So I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's why I went out there. But it was the first thing I thought of was, this is the growth market. And I wanted to be able to tell people, yes, we deal with, and I remember how proud I was, sometimes we'd go to Chasna in the Grosvenor House Hotel, let's say, it doesn't happen often. And one of the waiters came past and I knew them because I did a tablecloth. Wow, I felt so proud, we're the people who are,
the movers and shakers.
Yeah. I often say actually, because talking about the Grosvenor House Hotel, which is still to date the biggest contract. So one of the areas that we supply the Grosvenor House Hotel, and it's a daily supply. So when we do an event at the Grosvenor House, we charge them everything, but every so often they do a charity event. When they do a charity event we have to supply, because they're putting on an event for a charity they support. So we have to supply the tablecloth no cost. I often say,
that's their terms with you.
There's a few events that you've got to supply. Because I often say that when I get up to speak sometimes, and I don't know what language to speak, especially in Stamford Hill, everyone speaks Yiddish. And I say, I learnt my lesson from the Grosvenor House as to never ever judge someone by their cover. And it was one of these events where we were supplying the tablecloth for free. Now, what they give us back for that is 2 places at the dinner. Some of these dinners, some of these awards are amazing. They give you 2 places, and they're usually at the back somewhere with people who don't quite know where to seat. They'll supply kosher meal and everything. And you're usually ending up next to, now if you go with a colleague, it's fine, but sometimes you go on your own, and you usually end up next to a random group of people who don't know each other. And I was sitting next to a Chinese-looking gentleman who was sitting there, not talking at all. I tried to make conversation, and I realized very quickly that he speaks Chinese or Mandarin, and I speak English, and there's no way we're going to. So I tried to and I kept on smiling at him. He smiled back to me, and I made these stupid comments like goody fishy, like the fish is good, or tasty soupy, or hotty meaty. And he looked at me each time as if and I just gave up. Yeah. Anyway, eventually the dinner finished, and then they called up the guest speaker, who was none other, I don't know why I was sitting at my table, than my colleague. And he got up to speak. He was the head of the Marriott Group in the Far East, and he spoke for 45 minutes in Queen's English about Brexit, about the economy. An amazing speech in Queen's English. Came back eventually, sat down next to me, he smiled, and he said, goody speechy. I learned then that the way people speak is not necessarily, people understand. He just looked at me as, I don't need to speak to you now. I've got a speech to prepare.
Oh, wow.
So,
in his mind, he probably thought, who I am, why are you bothering me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. You touched on something before, which wasn't directly an answer to my question, but I wanted to bring it up with you. And that is this idea of your industry isn't an industry that's completely saturated within the Jewish community. It's quite unique.
It's very interesting because we spoke about competition, and obviously people listen to your podcast and I think, I'll open up a linen rental company. Linen rental, look, if you think about within the Jewish community, so what would happen is you're someone who's going to work in a property management company, and he's got the skill set, and he just doesn't know the processes. So he thinks, I'll learn the processes, and he goes out on his own, and good luck to him, and he'll see some of the mistakes that maybe his boss is making, and he'll see some of the things that he can do better. Maybe he's better at customer service. Really what he's selling is himself, and obviously he needs a team of people to work behind him, but the setup isn't hugely complicated. When it comes to tablecloth, firstly, it's very costly. You've got to buy all the tablecloth. Many of the caterers who we dealt with have thought themselves, when they look at costs and they think themselves, how can they save money? So imagine a caterer who's always renting crockery. And he thinks to himself, why do I rent crockery? I'm better off buying a dishwasher and washing the plates. It's easy. And they often do that. And many caterers have thought to themselves, I'll buy a tablecloth. Why not? But then tablecloth come back at the end of the event, and it's amazing how you can see the whole menu, the whole dinner, because some caterers are really careful. They fold up the tablecloth and neatly others, but most of them, every single bit of rubbish that's on the table gets folded up and it comes back. And there's, aside from mice and rats, which how can ever live, but you can have a whole meal at the back of the tablecloth. So they come back dirty. Obviously, tea towels are wrapped up inside it and it's wet. They've got to be washed. They've got to be folded. They've got to be pressed. It gets damaged as well, and that's also part of it. It gets damaged. It's a hard product to look after, quite a messy product, and not an easy business to get into. I'm not saying it's not it's a lot of business. There is opportunity, but there's a lot of pieces on the way. There is one other piece which actually I didn't mention, but when you're running a tablecloth business, if you're a car rental company, you can set yourself up as being high-end. So you buy yourself luxury cars, and as soon as the car has a scratch in it, you'll give it into the garage. Or you could be, and I remember when I was in Manchester Yeshiva, there was a guy who rented out cars. They barely drove, but it was £10 a day. And you knew, you could never turn around to the guy and say, I took the car, there was a bump in it. That's what you're paying for. That's why you're paying £10. When you're dealing with events and you're dealing with different types of caterers, you'll have a caterer like the Grosvenor House Hotel, like the Dorchester. They demand perfection. They'll pay for it, but they demand perfection. You'll have a Jewish caterer or an Indian caterer or someone who sells on price. So when they're selling on price, they're selling on price. That's what it is. So the Jewish caterer may be, doing a meal at £20, £30. The hotel is starting at £150. It's two different cars, completely different. Yeah. But they're both using tablecloth, and they're both using the same tablecloth. So when you're servicing a Grosvenor House Hotel, you've got to make sure that the tablecloth are perfect. That's what they're paying for. When you're servicing the Indian caterer who doesn't really care, he's paying for price. The challenge that we had was, so for instance, imagine the guy who's in the washing machine, in the laundry, pressing the tablecloth. So he's putting the pressing through, and he sees a small little mark on the tablecloth, takes it out, puts it to one side and says, that's got to go for a rewash because it's the Grosvenor House. But the Indian caterer, that's fine for him. So what do you tell your staff? Do you tell your staff, be really careful, there's a cost element in that, be really careful, make sure the tablecloth are perfect, because we're supplying the Grosvenor House. And you're only going to do 5 tablecloth in an hour because you've got to do it really carefully. There's a cost to that. The Indian caterer doesn't want to pay that. He says, put it through quickly. I don't care if there's a mark. I'll put a vase on it. I don't care. Or do you speed it through really fast and now you can charge less? So it's a really tough.
So the entire process
is really tough. So we had this system at the beginning where we would put tablecloth through at an average speed. And when it came to the other side, if it was fine, we would pack it up and we would put the size and we'd put a little A underneath. Internal code, it means it's good. When it was a bit of a problem, rather than for a rewash, we'd put the size and one line. It was what we called a one-liner. It meant, not sure if you can give it to the Grosvenor House, you can certainly give it to the Indian caterer, no problem at all. Or whatever, the cheaper end of the caterer, the Jewish caterer, whoever. When it was 2 lines, that was bad. That meant check it. So I could be sitting in my office and we'd have an order for 100 red tablecloth for the Dorchester Hotel. And the team downstairs would phone up and say, we've got a problem. The stock says 100. So we've got 100. 90 of them are good. 4 of them are one-liners and 6 are 2-liners. What do we do? So I would say, okay, it's a big event. Definitely obviously 90 you can give. The 4 you can give as well. The 6, let's check them. And sometimes I phone the customer and say, I'm giving you 6 tablecloth. They're marked separately. They are not as good, but it's all I've got. Just be aware of it. So put them on the side tables, whatever it may be. Two-liners, that's what we were called.
Yeah,
We called them
two-liners,
two-liners. But the Jewish caterer or the cheap caterer would get the two-liners. That's what we get. I remember one of the caterers once came into the office, and he came to pick up 20 white, didn't order them before, 20 white tablecloth. And I was busy going through the shelf looking for the tablecloth. He says, "What are you looking for?" I said, "I'm going to tell you a secret, but don't tell a soul. We have a code here. A is rubbish. One line is not bad. Two-liners are good. I get on so well with you. I want to give you the good stuff. I'm giving you the two-liners." And I remember him coming back a couple of weeks later when I wasn't there, and the guy downstairs didn't know who he was. He threw them all back and said, "I'm not taking this A rubbish. I want my good tablecloth, two-liners." It just went to show how different people...
Right.
So you can set up a business to cater to the non-Jewish world, to the high-end world. You just need to know beforehand and have your systems in place. I believe that the Jewish world is demanding more in terms of customer service now. The level has gone up.
Right.
You can't get away anymore with walking into a store and being rude to a customer. It's moving up the whole time, but the level of customer service and the level of maybe professionalism is a little bit higher. But I think it's just, to answer your question really,
Right.
I think it's just having the guts really, and just thinking bigger than that.
Interesting.
Most of our product, but the Jewish industry is big enough to support the Jewish industry.
Right, right. Well, it's just like a sub-economy, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Touching on, but go back to your father a bit and the split between different personality types. What would you say to someone who is happy, content, and loves where he's at? We hear so much about delegating, scaling, growing. We're hearing about your vision and what you wanted to do with the business. But what if somebody is truly happy just running a small, under-the-radar operation, small, tight team, or no team, perhaps just a one-man band, maybe with a bit of support externally? Does he need to be concerned that as a result of being happy in that space, over the long term, he's going to fail? And that the route to long-term success has to be by constantly progressing, constantly growing. He wants to enjoy the path that he's on of just running a small operation with a core base of clients, and that's where he is in his best space. What would you tell such a person?
So obviously, if the person's profitable, the business is profitable, and he's happy with that, and there's potential for growth, and he hasn't got a family member who wants to come in, or and he's happy with that, good luck to him.
Right.
If he wants to build a small business which is not going to be sellable really, and you have people like that, small businesses, profitable, doing well in their own thing, but they want to chavrus in the morning, and they want to come in at 12 o'clock, and they want to leave at 4, and they don't want to work on Erev Yontif, and they want to know they can switch their phone off before Yontif and say goodbye until after Yontif, and that's the type of life they want. Ashreichem, good luck to them. And of course, it's possibly scalable. Not all of them are. And it's fine for them.
And the trade-off would be that long-term scalability, sellability, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
My recent work with Work Avenue have seen something to be concerned of, though, is that people set up small businesses, and when they set it up or when they build it up, it was fine. Their costs were manageable, but costs go up. But they haven't moved. So the world has moved on. And I'm thinking particularly someone who is in the construction or more in the furniture space, and machinery moves on. The person who I met was someone who is really, his ehrlichkeit shone through. He was someone who was so transparent. You could see that he took pride in his job, building for people's houses, for bottom of drusha and things like that. And careful not to overcharge, really careful. You could see that he'd started the business in the 1980s, still a one-man band with one person working for him. And the principles of what he was born were still exactly the same. The problem was that the world had moved on. So, and he was so careful, I'm not going to overcharge. It's a shul. I'm not going to overcharge. I'm really careful. And, he would carefully price up a job, really carefully price up a job, using everything he had to work out how many days it's going to take him to cut the pieces and deliver it that way. And that's what he's going to do. And then he lost the job, and he couldn't understand why. He said, it's not possible. My margins are so small. It's not possible for anyone to go cheaper. But the bottom line was that he was using machinery that took 3 days to make it, but the world had moved on, and now there was a machinery, with computer drawings that took a day. So suddenly he was unable to compete, but he was still stuck in his own space. He was still supporting his one guy who was working for him, and he was still supporting, his family, and he was living a lifestyle, not an expensive lifestyle, but the world had moved on. So someone like that is the danger, because you can get comfortable in your own position and not realize that you're actually not making any money at all. So really what you have to say is that you can't stay you can, as long as you're being profitable, as long as you know your numbers and everything is fine, then it's not a problem at all. Obviously, bring youngsters into it is obviously going to usually generate growth. If you're happy with your space and you're profitable, and you really know you're profitable,
right,
then that's your lifestyle.
So it's okay to be happy with that. Interesting. You store and recall anecdotes and things. Share with us some stories if you've got off the cuff of things that have just come across.
I recall one of the first times that we were delivering the We tablecloths. As I said to you, that we have events where we have to supply at no cost. One of the places that we also have to deliver for is when a hotel is making an internal party. So every hotel has a staff party for their own staff. Now it was a hotel who we dealt with a lot, and he would always fax through his orders as fax. You remember the fax machine?
Sure.
So I'll come on to it. I thought it's interesting how the world develops. But he used to fax his orders through in the morning and for the week. Now I used to go see him often. I was a good friend of his, and because that's the other thing which I did a business was become friendly with my customers. And I was in his office once, and he said, "I'm giving you a couple of orders. We've also got." When the hotels make their Christmas parties, they don't do it in December because December is their busiest time. They can make it in January, even February. It's their staff party. Right. He said, by the way, this weekend we have our staff party and I need 20 black and 20 red tablecloth. But it's not a purchase order because it's free. I said to him, you know what? You don't even have, Roger, you don't even have to fax it through because if you fax it through, you know what's going to happen. Someone will pick it up and will invoice it.
Right. And then you'll call me saying,
fine. No problem at all. I came back, I completely forgot about it. Now, it was a short Friday, it was February, and switched off my phone before Shabbos, and that was it. Now, he was expecting to deliver. He knew I didn't work on Shabbos, didn't deliver. I wonder why he hasn't delivered, but I guess it will come later. He called my phone, it was off. He called me a few times, and obviously I only knew this after Shabbos. He called me Shabbos morning, left messages on my phone, where's the table? I'm getting concerned, increasingly concerned, more concerned, and it didn't arrive. And the reason why it didn't arrive was because I told him, don't follow the system. Just tell me. Had he followed the system, it would have been fine. He was furious. He had tablecloth there. He used his own white, but he had it themed. And where he's going to go on a Saturday afternoon to try and find other people? He didn't. And he called me on a Monday and he said to me, listen, I'm an atheist. I don't believe. But I respect religion. That's fine. You know, you're religious. It's absolutely fine. But I cannot work with people who place religion in front of business. You need to go to your Beth Din. Now, he knew Beth Din because he had kashrus.
Right.
And you need to explain to them the dilemma. You tell them, put the problem down, explain to them what happens in the business. I need it in writing from your Beth Din that even when you're bowing down on temple on a Friday night, you can have your mobile phone. When you have that in writing, we'll continue doing business.
Wow.
But if not, I can't work with you because you've got your priorities wrong. He actually lost his job a few days later. I never dealt with him again. But
wow.
He
Did you lose the contract?
I don't know if we ever dealt with him again. Possibly, that I don't recall.
What a story!
But
that idea of following the process. Just if you've got something that works, don't try and circumvent that and hope for a better reaction.
Correct. And that is where my brother-in-law systems.
Who's your brother-in-law?
My brother-in-law is Zachary Rottenberg from Golders Green.
Right.
Very systematic.
Right. Okay.
Systems. And you're right. So even in a case like this, send the message through that this is I need tablecloth, but I'm not going to I don't expect to be charged for it. But when you try and beat the system, but I remember that message. Now the Rabbonim will say, oh, that's why he lost his job.
Right.
But it was a fascinating story as to the danger. By the way, not the danger, but the pitfalls of dealing with someone who doesn't understand your religion.
I suppose that's a concern that's in sort of in the psyche of a lot of people. Like you're saying, just having that common understanding between common folk of the community.
Yes.
There's just so much already that's answered and boxes that are checked.
Correct.
By default of the fact that we all grew up together and we live in the same environment. What about lessons along the way? I mean, that's a lesson of processes. What other lessons could you say like that was a pivotal moment in how we decided to change a process or how we speak to customers?
So I would say like this: the business grew quite quickly. In other words, we started off with working out a house in Chardmer Road. That's where my father started off the business there. We moved to Belfast Road to a warehouse there, and then we bought our own place a few years later where the business still is. And I'm not involved, but the business is still there as it is. And the process was quite a quick process, which means that on the way, we grew very quickly. And when you grow quickly, a lot of things can go wrong. So over trading, where you are trading too much, you're actually doing more than you're actually set up to do, can always be a problem.
Speak out why. I've heard this concept. What is the overtrading
So
concept?
I'll give you an example. We were December 2023. We were so busy that obviously we're working around the clock, and you're sending drivers out. Now I recall driving up Lee Bridge Road I'd only been home for a couple of hours, and I saw 2 packets of our tablecloth on the road, on Lee Bridge Road. I stopped, picked them up, and I realized that we had sent the driver out so fast we'd forgotten to close the back door of the van, and some orders had fallen out. So now think about that. So the driver had arrived wherever he had arrived without two packets of tablecloth, if maybe more even. So what has to happen straight away is you've got to send a taxi out. The extra costs, you're losing money. So you're thinking you're making money, but you're actually, because it's a simple thing, closing the door. You think anyone closes the door, but because everyone's so rushed and so processes get overlooked, you're doing too much. You're trying to win too much business, and therefore it's basically, if you want to put it as an analogy, you would say it's just a bath where you're pouring water, huge amount of water at the top, but you haven't got a plug at the bottom. So you're pouring because you want to get the water in there, but you can't fill this bath. And the reason why I can't fill this bath is because there's leaks all over the place. So we reached a stage, 2003, 2004, where we had 10x the business. I mean, it was 10 times the size. But then we hit a wall. In other words, we hit the wall. We hit this wall. We couldn't grow it anymore. We tried different things, new customers. We just couldn't do it. Now, I remember meeting someone. In fact, there's someone in America who's particularly successful in setting up a business. Bernie Heitner, I don't know if you've heard his name, and his partner. They set up a business, money changing. They set it up in their dining room. Small business, changing money.
Right.
They grew it really, really quickly. Offices all over. In the end, they sold it for hundreds of millions. A huge business. And I remember we used to buy fabric from China, and I remember dealing with this company. And I remember the process where we used to deal with them, and it was very yeshivish. Till they answered the phone, they didn't answer the phone, and till they did the deal, you're buying dollars and everything else. Almost overnight, they became sharp. And I remember I was once driving, and I asked our agent why have they become. He said, "Oh, we've got a new sales guy, and he's really, really hot on processes. Go and see him." So one day I was in December, and I was driving past. I thought, you know what? I'll go in there and I went up to him and said, "You don't know me. I'm one of your tiniest customers. We don't buy much at all. There's no way that we feature in your radar. But I just want to tell you, as an outsider, well done, because overnight this business has become efficient, and it's almost like a bank. It's become."
Yeah.
So he said to me, he was really happy to, anyone, he's an American, a brash American Texan. And he said to me, "Oh, do you want to go out for lunch?" People, like compliments. So we sat down. I remember saying to him in the office, I said to him, "Do me a favor, I'm parked outside. It's cost me £4.90 to park. Give me one business tip." So he drew a funnel as to pouring business into it. And I remember, how to win business and everything else. I didn't understand what he was saying. I took the paper away, I didn't understand what he was saying. I called him back later. I said, "I've tried to, I don't even know which way to hold this paper, which way it is. Can we meet?" So we met up in Ruben's restaurant and he said to me, "Look, I was only a short-term contract with this finance company."
What year was this? Sorry.
This was 2005, maybe. It's a while ago. And at that time, I was at this frustration where I couldn't grow this business. My father said, "If you want to grow it," we were all working hard, but there was no more growth in there. So I met him, and he said to me, "I was only a short-term contract with these people. We're setting up on our own. Me and my partner, we're going to become consultants. Do you want to be our first?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to be." It was a ridiculous amount of money he was charging, $13,000 a month, he said. And he said, this brash Texan, "We're going to put systems in place, and we're going to bring over." Now you're turning over £4 million or whatever it's £3.5 million. You're going to hit £10 million with very quick space. We're going to put systems in place. And we're starting January the 1st. Now, my father was really against it. My brother-in-law wasn't 100% sure whether it was the right thing. But I thought, this is what we're going to do. Crazy price, but it'll pay for itself anyway. These brash Texans walk into our place, which was, even though it was busy, it was a family business. It was, my father would come back from Mincha with cake, and it was just one of those businesses. Walk into the staff and have a schmooze with them. It was, just the way it was. You'd say over a 40 her just then. And these guys were on the nail. Your working thing. 8 o'clock, you're at your desk, means your desk at 10 to 8 and you're at work at 8 o'clock. And every day at 4 o'clock, there's going to be a meeting with the head. Thing. No matter where you are, it doesn't make a difference. 4 o'clock is 4 o'clock. Chuppah, chassa, I don't care. Bring me in, and we're going to get rid of all the deadwoods. It means you're carrying staff who, you're getting rid of all of them. They're all going, this is where it's going to be. And I was really excited about it at the beginning, but even after a time, and they were very respectful of my father. They called my father the rabbi. Right. But they said to me quietly, look, his head's not in the business. He should be respected as the rabbi of the business. They moved his office to like the corner office, built it, nice books in there, his forum in there, and took away a lot of his role. So he could just do, and they respected him. I must say they respected him. But they were really, really tough on everyone else. And after a while, even I became uncomfortable. They were demanding a lot. I went to Texas twice to their place to understand their big dreams of taking it. And then August came. It was the first day of that year. I think it was 2005. Maybe it was late 2007. I don't remember.
So you had run with them from Jan to August.
We were running only 6 months, right. And we were struggling to pay the amount. And I said, we're struggling to pay the amount. We're not doing the business. He said, don't worry. You borrow from the bank. It's going to all work for you. Came August, and now the guy who I met in this bank, he was the boss, and he had 2 people underneath him. He himself was a very honest guy, but he had 2 people working underneath him who were possibly less scrupulous, but also as vicious, really.
Right.
And they said, right, this is the first test. I want you and your brother-in-law to go away on holiday, and not once, because when we went on holiday, we ran the businesses from, wherever. Sure. We were on the phone the whole time. Not once are they going to call you. We're going to run the business because businesses cannot run on people by themselves, which is true. Yeah. We're going to run this business. No one's going to call you. It's ours for 2 weeks. I was very scared to do that, but that's what they think. I thought, wow, this is the future. This is about building a business which is not reliant on people. This is what they were selling. But we were uncomfortable. And when we came back, I knew that this is not for me. This is not for me. This setup's not for me. We'd signed a 3-year contract with these people, and it was almost impossible to get out of it. But I remember coming back and going to the car park the first day, and there was a car park there which I didn't recognize, like a private number plate. And I said, who's thing? He said, oh, that's John, one of the 2 people. Okay, that was private number plate. He lives in America. Well, I have private number plates are weird. Anyway, the end of the month, they give the costs into, and one of the costs was car rental, because there's a car rental. I thought to myself, car rental? Yeah, a private number plate. That's not, you don't rent a car with a private number plate. So it took a long time. We had to dig around a bit. It took us a few weeks, but we realized then that he was borrowing a car from a friend here, but putting through expenses as a car rental. So that day we broke the contract, and I called the guy in America. I said, listen, a contract as a consultant is based on trust. The trust is now broken. The contract is over. And he didn't know the boss. But it was a perfect way for us to get out of it, and we could almost like breathe. Wow, we've got our business back again. It schlepped down. Now he sued us for the full value of the contract, and we countersued him for the money back that we'd spent him. So this was going backwards and forwards. Each of us using lawyers. Eventually, it was going to court. Both of us none of us had money. He also didn't have, and he was using some sort of half-baked lawyer, and so were we actually. But we went to court, and the way it works in the court was you come there in the morning, you submit your thing, and then they say they're going to hear. It's not a jury court; it's in front of 3 judges. And our case was like 1:15, and we were there at 9:15 in the morning. And then you have 4 or 5 hours doing nothing. So we were sitting like in the dining room with our lawyer, and he was sitting there with his lawyer. And he called me. I was a friend of his at some point. Yeah. He said to me, "Josh, what are we doing here?" I said, "What are we doing here? You called me to court and everything else." I said, "That's why we're here. You called me." He said, "Let's settle." I said, "Fine. I'm delighted to settle." £20,000, I think he started off with. My lawyer said, "Go back to him and say settle the other way around." But in the end, we settled on his air ticket. I think it was maybe £1,700 we pay him, and we went back to the court and said, "We've settled." Okay, the case was over. Then he called me that evening. I hadn't spoken to him in a long time because this was already over a year, till it gets to court. I hadn't spoken to him. He said to me, "I'm staying in the West End. Do you want to come for a tea?" My wife said, "Are you crazy? He's going to kill you." I said, "No." I said, he's a good guy. He was taken for a ride. And I went over there, and it was a bit uneasy in the beginning, but we sat down. I said to him, "I'm going to be very honest with you. The challenge we took on, you were our first customer. It's impossible to build your business." And he said to me something which I've remembered all the way through. He says, every business has a ceiling as to how far it can grow. And that will be, for instance, a taxi company can have a system and has, let's say, 50 cars, but their system handles 50 cars. So if you bring in 20 more drivers, the drivers are waiting outside, but the system doesn't handle it. So he says your system handled £3 million worth of turnover. In other words, you had 7 vans on the road, you had a computer system, you had laundry space, you had covered space. That's what you had. Taking your business to the next level wasn't just a case of bringing in more customers. It was breaking the business right down to the ground and rebuilding that. So I'll be honest with you, we couldn't have done it. Yes, we were taking you on a ride. Okay, so I learned 2 lessons. Obviously, don't trust consultants. But more than that every business has a ceiling. And
let's rephrase that. Don't trust unscrupulous.
Don't trust every consultant.
I'm
consulting myself now. Don't trust myself. Yeah, obviously, not everyone, especially brash Americans. The more brash they are, then often they're going to be, But more than that, also, obviously, people will promise things that not necessarily need to really look at carefully. The other thing also to remember is know what you want, because ultimately the £10 million business was not right for us anyway. But more than that, can your business sustain it? Now I know the property industry is very different, because when you're buying and selling property, it's different. But if you're in the service industry or you're in the selling industry, there is often a ceiling where you're going to reach, and you can't breach that ceiling. If you try and breach that ceiling, things will collapse, and you need to know that ceiling in order to be able to know how far you can grow. And if you're bored in that, then go do something else.
Right.
Or just be happy with, you mentioned before about the person who's happy with a small business. Even if he's not happy with a small business, he's happy with a big business, sometimes that business is going to hit a natural ceiling and it can't grow anymore.
Unless they're willing to go back to the basics.
Unless they're willing to break the whole thing back down and rebuild that.
Or moving new premises.
Yeah, sure. That means new premises, new vans, new computer system, new systems completely.
Right. So changing the infrastructure that can handle
But don't just
growth,
build little boxes at the corner of it, because that's not going to work in the end of it. And that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned from that. So on the back of that, because I sort of reached my point, my father was then lifted 4 years later, and then we split the business. So the challenge I said to you about the Jewish business and non-Jewish business, it's more than just the one-liner and two-liner. A non-Jewish customer will send an email 3 weeks beforehand and say, I've got a wedding on 27th of February. I need delivery it day beforehand. All the parameters.
Organized,
The Jewish caterer will call you at 4:00 when you show up in the hall. Oi, I have a chasna now. I've got all the tablecloth. I need 30 tablecloth now, and he put the phone down. Now he's talking to a member of staff who doesn't know what a chasna is, doesn't know where Yesod Torah is, certainly doesn't know what color it is, and doesn't know. She'll phone back and say, did you just call? Do you mind to send an email with an order? We'll process it tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning I've got another chasna. It's not going to work. So you have to understand the mindset of how it works. So if I'm answering the phone, so I'll figure out, listen, if he doesn't know what color, it's going to be white or cream. It's Yiddish chasna. 300 people means 30 round tables, a few long ones, 300 napkins, chasnas tonight, pick it up tomorrow, take care of it. We'll worry about it. But that's a system which is not a system, but you need to have a president. So we separated the Jewish and non-Jewish business, because the Jewish business has its own mindset. In fact, so much so that the one who runs it, the one who owns it now, he actually looks at the Kol Mavasa the week beforehand and preempts it. So he works out who's catering it. And he'll even call the caterer and say, by the way, you have a wedding tomorrow, you haven't ordered tablecloth, what do you need? So, that's a different way of working, but knowing how that business works. So that's not the Jewish business. And then we opened up our own business, which is manufacturing. So I bring in fabric for the Far East, and we manufacture tablecloth. A lot of hotels will have registration tables. They want a tablecloth with their logo on it. So it's quite specific, not for the events, internal things, and bespoke. And what I also realized at that time, I opened up my own business, manufacturing, is that when you're offering a bespoke product, which you haven't got competition for, obviously it's a completely different, you're not being measured with price. As Yidden, we often think that our first thing we need to look at is pricing and just try and undercut that, which is often a mistake. But I learned this quite quickly, because it was one of our first days we were operating, and a party planner called us up, an event planner, and she said, can she come into our place? I said, fine, absolutely, you can come in, no problem at all. She said, I'm representing a shoe shop. I don't remember to call the shoe shop. On the corner of, there's an arcade that runs between Burlington Street and Oxford Street. It's called Burlington Arcade. High-end shops, really petite, beautiful shops. And it's like a long, narrow corridor. And she said the shoe shop on the corner is running a 150th anniversary, and they want to do the event in the shopping centre. And now they said, but this is the challenge. Shopping centres open to the public till 6 o'clock, and then it closes at 7, and the event's starting at 8:15. So we have an hour and a quarter to turn a shopping centre into a high-class event. So this is an event that's running precision, military precision, which means that at 7 o'clock, the red carpet's going down. At 7:02, the chairs are going down. At 7:04, the tables. At 7:07 is the tablecloth. It's one long table, 220 feet, 72 meters long, whatever it is. And we have no time because at 7:12,
right,
the crockery is going down. So we need one tablecloth that goes all the way fitted from the beginning to the end, 220 foot. You can't buy that on.
Sure.
Yeah. So calculated, and it's got to be perfect. It's got to be. And she said, you have no time at all we're going to give you to the inches, but I do want you to come when you deliver to bring a sewing machine in case you need to make some adjustments. It's not possible. And so I remember thinking, okay, it's quite a lot of fabric. It's a big piece. It could be really heavy and everything else. It costs us around about £1,200 to make. So I remember going, I was Jewish, and I was a bit scared of what can I charge? I thought, okay, 1,200, 2,400, that's no problem at all. 24, still quite cheap. I'll double it to 48, and then doubled it again to 9,600. I just out of the blue, thinking to myself that, okay, a bit nervous about this. And she said, oh, that's a fair price. That's a fair price. And then I remember her calling me and saying, oh, I've got bad news. I thought she's going to cancel the order. She says, no, we're adding an extra guest. So we need an extra 50 inches of fabric.
Right.
How much extra will it cost? I said, you know what? I'll throw it in. She said, you're so kind, so benevolent. It's so nice of you. And then I realized that when you're offering a product that is bespoke,
right, so you've got the market.
You've got the market. In fact, just to finish that one off, the question is what to do with it afterwards. So she said one of the conditions was, very much planet driven and green driven. She wants us to bring it back to our place. It was heavy. So when we brought it, it was like we could carry it like it was on a roll. But afterwards, it's going to be. And can we cut it up and into small pieces? She wants to send it to India. Thankfully, it was December, and they had wax. They had candles all the way down the center, and they had these heaters blowing down. So it melted the wax. And I said to her afterwards that once there's wax on the fabric, there's nothing you can do. So that
saved you.
Yeah. So that's what we do at this moment in time, which is our the other part of the business, the bespoke business. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. What a journey. So much to. I'm assuming we can just go for hours just reminiscing on the different. But I do want to get to. I want to discuss Beis Bracha with you. Your recent work. Obviously, we know charities are very often non-profits. They're founded by good people. They're run by good people. But somebody like yourself, with all that business experience, every story, every touch point, just teaching you something new and helping you refine your processes and refining your operations, and then being brought into a charity with all that experience behind you to try and revamp the way this charity operates with that business experience. Tell us how the two of you met, how you got introduced to Beis Bracha, what did you want to achieve, and what that journey looked like, basing your experience and operations into the charity.
So the Beis Bracha, as we know, is the Mother and Baby Home in Stamford Hill. It's one of the flagship union organizations, and they were running. It's running. I mean, it's interesting because it's 19 rooms. So using my chasna hat, you understand straight away that if a caterer is catering an event for 100 people, generally he's not going to make money because his overheads, which is his van and his kitchen, are the same. He makes money when he's making 300 people and it's 400, 500 bits, even though he needs an extra piece of chicken and an extra piece of schnitzel. Right. That's fine because that's a small cost. Yeah. Because his overheads are the same. Beis Bracha is pretty much the same. It's 19 rooms, but the overheads to run it, you could run almost the same on 40 rooms. So that's the challenge Beis Bracha has in terms of an organization that's doing fantastic work, but it's not profitable. And it can never be profitable in its format.
Because of that equation.
That's probably the biggest equation. The cost per bed of 19 beds is not a cost that you can pass on to the community. It's just unfair to pass on to the community. There's always going to be a gap. It's a boutique hotel, but not able to charge boutique prices. So a 19 or 20 bedroom hotel, and there's loads of those in the city, would charge £300 to £400 a night, and that's not looking after babies 24 hours a day. We're not able to charge that. So that's the challenge Beis Bracha has. How can you make it work? How can you make it function? The other thing also is that it also connects to cost is how strict can you be with people who can't afford to pay? In other words, do you say that I'm here to look after the mother and she can't afford it. Therefore, I'll somehow make it work, even if she can't pay. Or do you look at it as a business and you say, I'm sorry, if you can't afford to pay? Leiber Hirschler, who set up Beis Brucha, he wore his heart on his sleeve. And for him, the most important thing was to make sure a mother, I'll figure out how it runs. I'll figure out how to pay for it. I'll figure out how it's... If you can't afford, you're coming to Beis Brucha. On the contrary, if I have two people in front of me, one who can afford it and one who can't afford it, if you can't afford it, that means you probably can't afford a night nurse. You're coming into Beis Brucha. Wow. And I'll try and make that work.
He completely set aside the commercial angle to it.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, this is a stocker. That's what I'm here for. The problem with that is staff do need to be paid. HMRC needs to be paid. Suppliers need to be paid. And if you're busy all day trying to run the place and also to try and find some sponsors, it doesn't work. So they were at a place where they were about to close. They owed a huge amount of money. Not due, I'm saying, I'm very careful. This is not Leiber Hirschler's fault. This is a product of his heart.
Right.
This is what this is. But this was the reality. So they called us in, and I myself have run a few campaigns for the Yeshiva of Sha'arei Torah, and Baz, who's my partner, has run many campaigns. So they called us in the union. Can we run a campaign? One of the matching campaigns for Beis Brucha. So we said, is it okay if we spend a few days here just to understand the problem before? So we went back to them after a week. We said, the campaigns, firstly, you've got a problem anyway. Who's going to be your team? The people that come, they pay. So who are your few managers?
Who's the beneficiary?
But the bigger problem is that the organisation is losing money all over the place, and you're going to raise £150,000 on a campaign. Who are you going to pay first? And then what? You're going to raise the money. You can't go back to the community again. There's a problem with the whole organisation. And then, sadly, Leiber Hirschler's wife was unwell. She was nifta, and he moved to America in a very short space of time. And suddenly, Beis Brucha had no managers, so they brought us in. So we came in, obviously, first of all, fresher. We came in, we knew her. But right at the beginning, and we brought in a chairman, Kiva Hochser, who's got huge business experience behind him. And I think the thinking at that time was that we need to take our neshama stays here, but our giving heart has to be a little bit drawn back. So Kiva Hochser says his father Mendel ran Kadassia and also turned it into a profitable organization. And Kiva Hochser's his mantra was we need to treat the business side of this business as a business. There's obviously a stock element, and there's a human element, and there's a mother element, but there's a business side of it, and we need to be very strict in that part, because if we can't, so myself, him and Basha, we came in and we looked, obviously it took us time to look, and we had to almost immediately put pricing up and do that quite viciously and quite quickly.
Right.
But the harder part was also almost saying, listen, Beis Brucha is running at a deficit of £300,000 to £400,000 a year. And that's money that we've taken upon ourselves to raise. And there's the good people in the community. You husband or you mother are staying here for 6 nights and you can't afford it. And it's costing you £1,000. Now, if you don't pay it, that money needs to be raised. So we're going to have to raise another £1,000. That's now £301,000. You raise that £1,000. I know it's not easy. It's not easy to collect for yourself, but you don't have to collect for yourself. You're collecting from Beis Brucha. You run it, and we will... It's a mindset, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
I personally struggle with it. Baz looks at it more practically that way, and he's on it. He has to be on it, and phones people and he calls people, and it's not easy. And people almost say, "Hang on, it's a Stutz Kehilla thing. It should be free, but it's there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah. This is what it is, and it has to be. Now we have amazing stories on the way, and there's Siyat Shmaim. We have people who, and I recall, because the way it basically works is, Mr. Hochser, the chairman, oversees everything. I look after the day-to-day running, the ordering, some of the staff. He looks after the financial side of it, Baz Stern. Right. So, and we're quite clear. I struggle, if a person says I can't pay a circuit, don't pay. And he says, I'm sorry, this, and works out a plan with them. And there's ways they can do it. There's obviously, we take back, it's a charity, you can pay that way, and you can we pay over installments, but you need to pay. And he deals with that side of it. At one time, we had someone who came in to Beis Brucha in the morning. Usually, they leave at lunchtime and they pay in the afternoon.
Right.
When he's there. I'm there in the morning, he's there in the afternoon. But this fellow came in the morning, Chassidish, Koil younger man, he came in, and he knocked in the office and he said, how much do I owe? So I said, look, we have two pricing. We have a 225, which is our full price. We have a discounted price of £200. At that time, we gave it even a slight discount to 175. He's there for 10 nights. So I said, look, 225. I could see straight away, 225. I'm not going to mention it. I said, £2,000. If you're struggling, 1750. He said, I don't have what to eat tonight. You know, one of these ehrliche people. I said, what are you thinking? I said, I don't know. What should I say? I don't know. I'll ask my wife. These are the people, this is the problem. The Leiber history of this world to say, okay, I'll sort it out. Yeah. I just knew, thank God, I'm not doing this. Mr. Stern will do all this. This is one of those, I put down a piece of paper. You've got a challenge this afternoon, yeah? Line number 4253, you have a challenge. Anyway, 3 minutes later, another guy walks in. His wife was supposed to leave the next day. He's leaving that day. So how much is his bill? 675, takes out his iPad, connects to Achisomoch, and pays. Okay, it's really nice. Then he says to me, by the way, is anyone struggling in Beis Brocha? So I said, it's interesting you asked me because normally I wouldn't know that because I don't deal with it.
Right.
A minute ago, you probably see the fellow's Becker show walking up the stairs. This guy just walked out and so I was thinking to myself, he's probably going to pay the night because his wife was supposed to be the fourth night. He'll probably pay that night. So he said, I think I recognize him. Do you know, I think I was in yeshiva with him. He's a Frimmer, yeah? He's a El. I said, yeah. So he said, he mentioned his name. I said, yeah, that's his name. Okay. Takes out his iPad again. He says, it's paid. I said, what's paid? He said, I've paid his bill. 175, I've just paid his bill. But one condition, he mustn't know that I paid his bill. I paid his bill. So I said, are you sure? He said, yeah, I paid his bill. I said, why? I don't know. Paid his bill. I can see what the organization does. I paid it. So I waited till he went. I went upstairs, knocked on the door. I said, by the way, it's paid. He was sitting on the couch, his wife was sitting on the other couch. So she said, what's paid? So I said, your bill has just been paid. She said, who by? I said, I can tell you, but then you have to pay it back. So I'm not sure you want to hear that. So she said, this is the Ehrlichkeit. She says, I just said to my husband, if the Eibush just schickt us, the Erosion send us another child, he'll send us the means of paying for it. Truly Ehrlich, truly like genuine believers. Yeah. And it was paid. But that's the nice side. You know, that's the, on the other hand though.
It doesn't always work
it doesn't always work that way. And people do have to pay. So what we brought to Beis Brocha was an element of systems in place. Pay the suppliers in time. Mr. Hawkins is really, really, really keen about making sure suppliers should not have to phone Beis Brocha to chase us for money. Pay them on time. And therefore, he's able to sit down with the supplier and try and get better price. Now, he's not getting a better price himself. It's always for stock. And sometimes the supplier will say no, but most people want to supply. Beis Brocha is like it's a nice, warm organization. And therefore, but when you're going in there and you're saying, I know I haven't paid you for 6 months, will you get a better price? It's a lot harder to do.
For sure.
We brought the structure into Beis Brocha, systems in place and staffing and things like compliance and staff contracts and working with the staff as well and making sure that the mother, and our motto is really it's all about the mother, because what we realized was that if you look after the baby, the mother, you're looking after the baby as well. So systems like make sure you're friendly to the mother, make sure that you are, and it really, I don't know, my wife went there many times as well, but it's not an organization that actually put my head into and realize what it does.
It's kind of just always been there. It's just one of those things.
Yeah. And it's really, I mean, it's amazing stories of mothers have come in, literally can't walk, and they walk out 7 days later. And it's just the knowledge that, you've got staff there who are caring and staff that want to be there. Our oldest member of staff there, oldest, when I say oldest, most senior, let's say, not oldest in age, she's non-Jewish, Penny, her name is, everyone knows Penny. She must have changed 250,000 nappies in a life, I reckon if there's a Guinness Book of Records but she's seen, and I've often asked her, she's seen generations, right?
Sure.
So she came to me not so long ago and she said, she comes to the office with always like a serious face, and I think, oh, what's now? Because she feels like she's like the grandmother there. She says, Mr. Leitner, no, this is a good story, it's a good story. So she says, do you know the mother that just came in now? So she said, I want to tell you a story. She said 25 years ago, the mother who came in now was a baby, obviously, 20 there. And she came in as a baby to Beis Brocha, and I was bathing her. It was my first years there. And as I was bathing the baby was shaking in the water. And it didn't look right. I didn't know what it was, but the baby was like... So I called the mother, who was post-cesarean, post-difficult birth, and I said, your baby's shaking in the water. She said, Penny, I don't have the strength. I don't have the strength to come to the nursery to check it. Maybe, I don't know, whatever. I don't know what to say to you. Call my husband. Call the husband. That was the first time for me. The husband says, the Wasser is bisschen kalt, put more water into it. The staff in Beis Brocha all speak Yiddish. So it's like, we do. So she said, no, this is not the water. There's something wrong. There's something with the baby. It may be nothing. So Penny said, do you know what? I'll take the baby to the doctor. I'll take the baby to the hospital. Got, it was easier. Obviously nowadays you need much more. But she got a letter, she went to the doctor. Anyway, it turned out this baby was ill and needed surgery quite quickly. And the baby was transferred to Great Ormond Street. And the baby had the surgery. Well enough, the baby, by the way, that 25 years later, the baby comes back. The mother now comes back. With a baby of her own. And Penny walks in and says, I just want to tell you that it's my einikel that's in Besrocha. It's my einikel. Brilliant. So these are beautiful stories that, Besrochas, we call Besrochas a life savings. Obviously, it's a life saving. This was one case where it was life saving.
It's part of the fabric of the community.
It's an organization which is, as Mrs. Spitz, who houses us, who runs the AR, says, it's sort of the flagship. It's the one she's most proud of. And they often do walking tours. They also often do walkabouts in Stamford Hill. They bring in counsellors and they visit Egerton Road Shul, and they visit, they visit all and they come to Besrocha. It's usually the last place. They all love Besrocha because it's something different. It's mothers and babies, and it's something which is
fascinating. And just in case that wasn't keeping you busy enough, you then came onto Work Avenue's radar. Avi Bar, a previous guest of this podcast, he said, when you want something done, ask a busy person. Right. I'm assuming that's what led Work Avenue to you.
I've always had, because of my exposure to the non-Jewish market, I also go to a networking group which is amongst Goyim, and I've, a lot of us are cocooned in the Jewish markets. I've always had this interest in other people's businesses just to understand how businesses work. And I was on an ad hoc, not charging basis, basically, involved in a couple of businesses. When Moshe Morris contacted me after the last H3 event, when his sort of vision to try and, Work Avenue has been around for 20 years. It was possibly not catering enough to the Hamish Olam, in as much as they look after 4,000 or 5,000 businesses a year, and it's amazing what they do, amazing of the depth and knowledge of their systems. But maybe the Hamish Olam weren't reaching out to them. Firstly, it's in Finchley. And for most Chassidim, the world ends at the end of Abbas Park. That's number one. So just getting there too. Now you can say you can meet on Zoom. Not all of them have that access. There is timing as well. We're not that great at timing. Yiddish,
it's different culture.
It's different culture. But also understanding the mentality. So you'd sit in front of a coach and she may say, or he may, whatever may say, have you looked at TikTok, or have you looked at, and the guy, what's TikTok? That's the clock that goes in my house. So, but Moshe Morris was driven to help any person and everything else. So he took me on as sort of that bridge. Look, we have the experience at Work Avenue. We have the knowledge. We have the systems. We need someone who speaks the language. Now, my Yiddish isn't great, but we have someone who just understands. Firstly, open up an office in Stamford Hill, so that way it's going to be local anyway. Someone who's able to bring the Work Avenue experience into
the infrastructure, incredible infrastructure. I've been to the Wall Enterprise Building. It's unbelievable what goes on there. I've been there a number of times. It's really incredible.
So his dream, his vision, Moshe Morris' vision is to have that, like we have here in Manchester as well, is to have that in Stamford Hill, have a hub, a working hub where people can come. Hot desk where they can sit there and work for a few hours, because at the end of the day, you're working at home. The fridge is always more attractive than the work, and also have courses there, management courses, to understand, and more and more the Yiddish community, Hasidic community in Stamford Hill is incredibly entrepreneurial, amazingly entrepreneurial. Some of the brilliant heads just haven't got the systems, and you can't blame them for that. They just don't know, and there's some fundamentals in business that if you don't have them, however good everything else is, your business has collapsed. I see people who, obviously profited, but people who are making basic mistakes. Obviously finance is going to be a big one. Integrity in business is going to be a big one, things like that. But sometimes you'll have someone who can, the business looks good, but underneath it, there's some basic mistake out there which they don't know. And a Work Avenue is not going to be someone who's cleverer than you. It's just a different look. And that, when I was trained, I was told that, if you draw a circle, you put 100 dots into the circle, and one dot represents cash flow in a business, and one dot represents customers, and one branding, and one may, banks and everything else. 20 of those represent the individual business. In other words, if an electrician walks into Work Avenue and says, look, I'm an electrician, I don't know how to wire a plug. So that's one of the 20, which I'm very sorry. You can't be an electrician, you don't know how to wire a plug. But electricians know how to wire a plug. They know how to wire it. So those 20, they're generally really good at. What they struggle in is the 80. Now, those 80 is no different than selling fabric, selling electricity. So
Right.
those 80 are the
Those
same.
principles
They're
are
principles.
generic, yeah.
So all we need to do is marry the 20, which you're good at, and bring in the 80, which some of it you're good at, and put those together, and then you've got a functioning business.
Right.
And that's really what Work Avenue are there to do. And it's a journey, and not every business is solvable, and not every business should be out there. But generally, and you've people who've been working the same business for many, many years, and they haven't just, when you sit down and ask questions which they've just avoided, just didn't want to address it, brushed it under the carpet, and you bring it out in the open, you send notes and you send it to them, it just opens them up. So, the organization, like you say, is an amazing organization. The Yiddish, the Haredi Kehillah have needed it. And I know Bells and Stamford Hill are, we just did an event actually in Bells recently. They're opening up their own hub. They're also trying to promote employment. The more there is, and this is not a business where, it's not a business for a start. This is not an organization that worries about competition, because it's not competition.
Right. You'd rather not have to exist.
It's everyone out there with the same motto, as Moshe says the whole time, is to earn Parnassa with dignity. And there's nothing more dignifying than someone earning his own, and he goes to the community and raises money. He says, at the end of the day, if we don't help this person, younger man, in 10 years time, when he's making chasna, he's coming back to you and asking for money for a chasna. So why can't we give it to him in a nice way where he can build that money and he can build his own chasna? The concept's amazing.
So you've opened an office in Stamford Hill.
So we opened an office in Stamford Hill. It's just started at 97 Stamford Hill on the top floor. We've opened the office up there. And I see people Mondays and Wednesdays. Obviously, fit it into what else we can do. And also, you need to work with.
Sure.
I had someone who came to me who struggles with timing. He was a bookkeeper, lost his job twice because of his timing. Now, I knew he had a problem because the appointment was 11 and he came at 12:15. So I knew that was a problem. But someone like that just needs to be taught that. See, he said, I don't understand what the problem is. I do the books. It's finished on time. But I said to him, that's fine if you're working on your own. But it's integrity. I said to him at the time, when I was coached, I remember my business coach saying to me that he gave me an example at the time. I don't remember who it was, a non-Jewish footballer. You can look it up in America. He says, picture this scenario where he's 17 years old. That's a 10. From 0 to 10, that's amazing. He's got age on his side. He's supremely skillful. That's another 10 times 10. He's playing for the best side in the United States. Another 10 times 10. We're up to 1,000. He's got all the money behind him to train. It's not 10. He's up to 10,000. So we've now got 10 times 10, 10. He has a drug problem. Times 0. In other words, it was 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. It's now 0 because that kid died 3 years later. So in business, you've got a 10, another 10, another 10. But sometimes you're going to have your last one, which is so important, and you don't tick that box, the whole business collapses. In some businesses that you're working for someone else, that's integrity. Coming on time. You can be super talented and you know how to reach customers and your boss really needs you and he's really strong with you, but he can't handle the fact that every single day you come late. You're downplaying all your points to 0 because of that. Or you can be in a business where you're excellent at what you're doing, but your customer, every business has a different 0. And we often struggle with that. And our businesses become 10 times 0 because of that. And that's really what we're there for, to try and keep that number. You don't have to be 10. You could be 8. You could be 7. But you mustn't have a 0 in the middle. Otherwise, you're going to kill it.
Fascinating. I mean, to have so much on your plate, was this part of, you mentioned earlier, and I want to come back towards that as we start to climb down the mountain after this incredible, riveting conversation. You mentioned burnout. Were you finding that you needed to just break out of the cycle of business in order to contribute back? What was that journey like?
So there was no question. From 2007 till my father, 2008, after my story with the consultants, until then, I was just on autopilot, doing the same thing every single day. And you talk about people that enjoy that. I didn't enjoy that anymore. It was the grind, and I was actually getting angry when customers called me. Then my father, it was a reset then and I still involved in tablecloth up to a point. Burnout is something which can happen to everyone and does happen, and there's nothing wrong to happen to that. And you really need to catch that when it does, and either reset yourself and say, I can't be working anymore 16 hours of business, or farming out something, or leaving the industry. my burnout took place, and I didn't realize it was. In fact, I'll tell you when I realized how stressed I was. It was we were working crazy hours, and I was doing this night and day shift, and I wasn't living a life. But in December, it was literally Havdolatul Kiddush. I was davening in between a laundry load, talis tefillin, putting it on, taking it off, and time to wrap it up. And I remember, finishing davening in the morning and loading up the next washing machine, and then seeing my tefillin spinning around in the washing machine because it was on top of the tablecloth, and I just thrown it into the washing machine. That's when I realized that this has gone wrong. There's something gone completely wrong. My talis was clean, but tefillin are not supposed to be clean that way. You can say we say you should be make sure you're clean when you're wearing tefillin. Right. It doesn't mean putting it into the washing machine with bleach and I mean they were the cleanest pair of tefillin afterwards.
Well, I'm sure.
So that's when you realize, and you have these moments in your life when you realize that something's gone wrong, and you're just either on autopilot. You haven't even got time to get the systems in place, and not everyone suffers it. Some people are fine. It could be temperament. It could be that how driven you get. It could be, and I suffered that. So for quite a few years in between, I was and then after my father was nifta, it was sort of a reset time for generally how we're going to move it forward, and that's when I over time that's when I sort of left and. I was still in touch with them, obviously, but that level of pressure is no longer.
So you just wanted to free up your calendar. Your day is yours now.
Slightly. I mean, I don't mind long days. I don't mind. I mean, obviously, work hour is very varied because each hour you're sitting with someone completely different. Beis Bracha is varied as well. Although there's obviously same jobs have to be done every single day. But you're dealing with people. I like dealing with people. That's obviously I also, as a result of leaving, one of the things what I used to do is I used to obviously work the laundry at night, and then in the morning, and then late at night do whatever I had to do, paperwork. I realized then that that's not good for me, this going to bed, being tired all the time. So I flipped my life, and I started going to sleep early and get up early, so, doubling the nets and get up early. So my day starts much earlier. So, Beis Bracha, the office has been manned pretty much, 20 back to back. And that's the way I've chosen as well. And the lesson to me was there that you can change things around even... I mean, I'm older already, past it, over the bridge, whatever you want to call it, but you can change things around. You don't have to be stuck in the same thing.
That's fascinating.
All the time.
It's just amazing to hear that journey from that busyness and then the scaling down and just regaining control of things. Just one more question, and then we'll come to our final closing segment. You mentioned very briefly that your older son, can I say his name? Avigdor was born with epilepsy. I grew up with Avigdor. School yeshivas. School yeshivas. I think I was in Gateshead as well as Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, so kind of grew up with him. Did you daven into First Amram? Of course, that's where I heard you learning. Of course. I'll tell you, I mean, I don't know if I can say this. When did you prepare for Shabbos learning?
So it's interesting because when...
I've got something not nice to say.
So first I'm going to set this. I came to Jungreis, the shul, not as a Balkora, but as the Gabba. And then he needed the Balkora to the thing. So when I used to go out, when I worked with my father in the morning, I used to take the orders, the A to Z map, and my Tekken Korim.
Right.
So it was. And I used to, at traffic lights, check where I'm going next, and then prepare my lining. That's what I used to do.
Fascinating.
Gradually, I got busier, and traffic got less, so I prepared less. So if you're going to say that I wasn't prepared...
So I never had an issue with it. I thought it was great. And then I remember after my bar mitzvah learning, Yumi Straw got up and he came up and said, beautiful learning. Yechiel Leitner needs to learn from you. This was I was 13 years old, but it's still very cool.
I mean, the shul's still there. It's a beautiful little shul. It hasn't grown. I never
made it. He needs to speak to you. I never made it back there after yeshiva days. I never
I don't know whether there's a story you can put onto a podcast, but for a short while I was a governor of the Beis Yaakov school in the Stamford Hill. So part of what we did there was always just the question you ask is, where they daven.
Right.
Because sometimes you never know, do they daven, which shul they daven in. So we had someone who came, it came for a very short while to the UK from Israel. The governors were worried as to whether he's going to be right for the school, how from he is, so they wanted me to go, we had to go through the questions. He lives somewhere down Vartry Roadway. So he asked me, so I had to ask him, where you daven? So he says, you won't know. there's a small bit of medrash in Stamford Hill. It's Heist Teferes Amron. I daven there. And he's probably thinking, listen, what are the chances? There's 7,000 families in Stamford Hill. There's 10 people at daven Yom Morris.
Literally.
What are the chances of the governor of Beth Yaakov davening at this shul?
It's brilliant.
I said, I lined there. I've never seen you there. So that didn't go very far. But,
Brilliant.
But the shul is still there.
Shul's still there.
I'm a still career there. And
You're still in?
I'm still
You're still in?
yeah.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah,
so that's
so
what, 20 plus? 30?
It must be 25, 30 years.
So fascinating. So go back to your son Avigdor. So you are in the thick of the business growth whilst you were dealing with the complexities of...
So he was my older son and obviously didn't know anything different. So he was born and he had some convulsions very soon after birth. Like when I say, and he was in hospital for quite a few weeks, and it took us a while till we knew that he had epilepsy. We didn't know what it was, just knew he had these convulsions. And I remember at nighttime, hearing a certain cough, which I knew even till today, even that's 35 years. If I hear that cough, I know what it was. You rush to his room, and there's often it was an epileptic fit. Nothing you can really do about it, but you don't know that as a child.
Right.
And we didn't know that as a child. Now I need to say that he grew up, and this just shows how Rebbeinu Shem runs the world. So he grew up in school with epilepsy. Now, the challenge of epilepsy is, firstly, there's nothing you can do. So you can have an attack, and you can make sure the patient is in the right position. But you don't know, if we haven't had an attack, you don't know what it's like. So, is a child weak afterwards? Can he just bounce back into life? It goes. And also, if he's feeling weak, do you want to send him to school?
Right.
So he went through life really, missed a lot of school. Because if he ever said, if my child says to me, oh, I'm not feeling so well, come on, go to school today. But if he says I'm not feeling well, you can't, imagine you send him to school and he has a bad fit.
Yeah.
School don't want him there. Temperature can trigger it. So he went through really missing quite a lot of school. I don't know if you remember this in school, but he missed quite a lot of school. Yeshiva as well. It was difficult. It was very difficult. He went to America. No, and I remember different doctors, a medication in epilepsy is all about, there's a lot of different medication. Yeah. It's about the balance, what you take in the morning, what you take in the afternoon. There's millions.
It's always a combination.
And you've got to get it right. And then as the body grows, you've got to change it. So things change the whole time. I remember a doctor here saying, listen, Victor, this is your, I remember her saying, the story about the person that each person throws their peckle into the pond and then you take out the one which is yours. And she said, listen, I want to tell you something. Yours has got epilepsy written on it. But you've got a great family and you're a great boy. And I'm sure if you had to pick out one from the pond, this is the one you'd pick out. And yet your packet says that you're never going to drive. And your packet says you're going to struggle in life. But that's it. That's what she said. In a nice way, that's what she said. So we hear you're 17, 18, you don't know what's going to be. He moved to America. He got married in America with epilepsy. He got married in America. In America, his father-in-law, Mr. Katz, was quite well connected with the medical scene there. There was a Gosha doctor there who was trialing something new in the epilepsy space. And basically, it was a pioneering surgery where if you had a certain type, epilepsy is a brain injury. If you had a certain type of brain scarring, then you could qualify for this trial. And he got my mechutten, Mr. Katz, even though he's not a American citizen, got him onto this trial. Yeah. And he went through the whole trialing, and they checked obviously, and they said yes, he fits the category of. Now the next challenge was this hospital. The operation was taking place at NYU, which is in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, super private hospital, and everything cost there as well. This was a $1 million, $1 million operation, so insurance covers it, but he had a pre-existing condition. Somehow, and I still don't know till today how, maybe that's why he had to go to America, he sorted that out that it was covered by insurance, pretty much, or not all of it, pretty much all of it. And he went through the operation. It was basically, I don't know how many hours it was. Hours. I mean, it was more than a day operation where they open up the skull and they rewire the brain and they remove the scarring. And I mean, it's a serious operation. You're in intensive care for a while, then recovery. Till you go back, it takes time. Siyat Nishmaya, he now drives. His job is now driving a minibus for people. He's a father of 4 children. He's a melamed in the schools there. And, I always go back to this Dr. Costello's pond and little thing, and to think the one thing you didn't put into there was Rebbeinu Shalom around the world. Yeah. And that he decides which
Complete-
package, which
complete-
package,
yeah,
which
complete
package you're
journey,
going to take. Yeah. So he's still on medication, and he'll always be on medication. But the Yechiel Leitner of epilepsy is a past. It's not,
Unbelievable.
Baruch Hashem,
Unbelievable. I still have vivid memories. I told you when we spoke last
Yes.
time of being on the grass by Amos Park.
That's right. That's
'Cause
right.
Like I said, at any moment, I would stroll over the Stender during
Yes,
Seder.
yeah.
It was.
In fact, you talk about Balkara. He's a Balkara as well, and sometimes it can come from pressure as well, and sometimes it only takes 10 seconds. And to his credit, he didn't hide behind. He said, "I'll line. I'll done forward. If I have an attack, no, they'll wait 10 seconds, and that's always fine, except one time a year. That's Mishnah Torah, because no one has patience at Mishnah Torah. So he was taking over. I did it then, younger guys. He was taking over, and as he started, he had an attack, and I had to whip the talus off him and carry on because people don't have patience.
Yeah.
But aside from that, which is the only time where in public, otherwise he
was
to his
confident
credit,
within. He was confident within.
he continued life as it was, but he couldn't drive, and the driving was a big piece.
And juggle. Avigdor, if you're listening, I say hi. It'd be amazing to catch you again one day. You had to juggle the family and all of that. I'm sure there was plenty of appointments that you had to deal with.
The business was, unfortunately, life goes by very quickly. In business, every day you've got to deal with it. I was there when I had to be there, but my kids grew up without me. I mean, I was my fiddling with the washing machine.
Right. I
was married to this business, and and you never get that back.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Also, by the way, things move very, very quickly. Your kids go from 0 to 10 and 0 to 10 very, very quickly. And I lived in Stamford Hill, and I worked in Stamford Hill, and I wasn't far away. But I, maybe the same as many fathers turn around and say, my children grew up despite their father not being there, rather than because of their father. Yeah.
Wow, Yechiel, you've shared unbelievably well. It's really so much to unpack. I know it's been a long conversation, and I thank you for carving out time of your day, even though it's the day is crawling away. Can we just close off with one more question?
Sure.
It's remarkable, I think, to see somebody who's had that journey like yourself, and you mentioned that the growth and then this taking a step down. I think very often somebody who's in the fast lane and just got that busyness to their life, for them to sort of something look in that rear view mirror and say, you know what, there's somebody lagging behind. Let me slow down to let them come up to speed. Let me show them where they need to go to. It's really remarkable. What does the community need to know in general about understanding the realities of what some of the other business owners might be going through? And sometimes when you're in the trenches, we just don't see it, we don't hear about it, we haven't got the time to comprehend that somebody in a building next door might be doing really poorly and need a listening ear, a shoulder to lean on. What do we need to understand from what you're doing?
So I would say that possibly the hardest trait and the biggest thing that we need to learn is to be able to forgive and to genuinely be happy for other people and help other people, which is what Work Avenue is about. I always remember when the National Lottery came out, we're talking about 35 years ago.
Right,
so I remember it was just the beginning of the internet as well. So that was the time. And I remember someone produced a BBC piece of paper, a spoof piece of paper on Purim, which said that there was a lottery at that time was £6.6 million. And it said in there, a Heimeshingerman in Old Hill Street had won the lottery. And he put in all the papers on Purim in the shuls. And everyone was talking about it, who it was. He won it. I think he won it. And then it turned out an hour later that it wasn't true. There was a sense of, I'm embarrassed to say this, being a relief. Oh, because why should he win it? Why shouldn't I win it? And it happens because we're within a community where we live so close to each other, where you know everything about everyone else. So if he can win it, he doesn't work. I work so hard. Why can't I win? This being able to forgive other people is probably one of the hardest things out there, and probably the one thing that would help all of us if we could genuinely, you know what, I'm happy for you that you've managed to buy a property, even though I couldn't buy one myself. I'm happy that you've done this deal, and even though I can't do it myself. And I'm reminded, obviously conscious of time, but the one story which I once heard from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and he says, and if I'm going over too long, then
it's fine. Yeah, we're good.
But the one story I once heard from him, he said he said the story, this is a true story, it was printed, I saw it actually printed in a book, and he said there was this court case in Yerushalayim. Mr. Weintraub was being tried in Yerushalayim, and he was, I don't know what it was, I don't know what the financial misdemeanor was, but as he was summing up, the judge said, is there anyone in the room that can say character, anyone? And an old lady gets up and she says, my name is Madame Blau, and I have a shop in Jerusalem, I have a bakery shop. And I just want to say this story. She said, my husband was the baker. We had 3 children, and he worked in this bakery shop, and that was his job. And I was at home as a mother. One day, my husband had a heart attack in the bakery, and he passed away. And now I had to take over. And I had no idea about business. I had no idea about how to run a bakery, but I had to do it. And one of the things I saw was that every month I left over, whatever it was, 1,000 shekel, whatever it is, in the envelope for the landlord to pick up. I'd never met the landlord. I used to leave this envelope and I'd put it away. Years it was that way. One day it was the end of the day, and a guy comes to the shop, and I could see he wasn't a customer. And he was waiting till everyone left. And I went up to him and he said to me, are you Madame Blau? I said, yes. She says, I'm the owner. Thank you very much for paying the rent. But I want to tell you something. I have been charging the same rent now for years, well before your husband died. The rent in this area is now over double. I have no choice. I can't afford to keep the rent. So she said, listen, I understand. Yeah, that conversation, and I fully understand. And I appreciate so much but I want you to know that if you put the rent up, I have to close the bakery down. I said, I don't know what to do. What do? I don't know what to do. Let's go to Besdin. So they went to the Besdin thing, and Besdin said, absolutely, you can put the price. You're charging, it's a business, you can put the price up. So that was it, put the price up. She said, the Besdin took place 7 years ago, and I haven't heard from him since. I'm still paying the same rent. That's what I want to say about it. So the judge turned around to him and said, Mr. Weintraub, end the story. So he said, this is going back a long time. He said, I am a Talmud of the Chechnova Rov at the time. And I wrote a letter to the Rov, and I said, what do I do? What do I do? On the one hand, I need to put the rent up. On the other hand, I've got an almana here. What do I do? So he sent me back a postcard, which he says I carry the whole time. And the postcard said, you should know something, Rav Yaakov, whatever his name was. The dinner's with you. You went to Besdin. The dinner's with you. You are allowed to fully put the price up. But I wanted to tell you one thing. In a certain amount of time, may it be 120 years, you, like me, like everyone else, is going up to Shemaim, and they're going to judge you as to how you treated. They're going to look at everything, and they're going to decide for you. How will they decide? How did you work with other people? If you worked with other people and you gave them extra, they'll give you the flag. If you worked Al Pi Din, that's what you get back. That's the postcard I got. So I once said the story over in public, and someone said, put their hand and said, but what happened? How much did you get? So I reminded Y.Y. Jacobs said, there's 3 types of people in the world. There's a shlemiel, there's a shlemazel, and there's a nudnik. The shlemiel pours hot soup over the shlemazel's trousers. The nudnik wants to know what soup it was. Was it chicken soup or was it vegetable soup? I have no idea. Yeah. No idea whether the guy went to prison or not. But the bottom line was that if we're able to forgive, it's going to help us in the long run. If there's one message, and I'm talking to myself, not talking to everyone else, is to be able to truly, and it's very hard within a community because you live next to people and you think that we know everything about, to be able to forgive, to be there, to help other people, to possibly let them go further than we ourselves have gone. That, I believe, is the one thing that would help Klal Yisrael.
Which everyone can go for. Yechiel, thank you so much for joining me today. Really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hatzlacha.